So, today I want to talk about the expansion of oil pipelines. Now, about 2 months ago, when I had talked about the Inflation Reduction Act being passed in the United States, I had discussed how the bill required the expansion of oil and gas production on federal public lands and through offshore drilling sites. For the offshore drilling sites in particular, it was mandated that at least 60 million acres be offered to oil and gas leases before offshore wind leases could be issued at all. In short, the bill was a disaster that was dressed as climate progress. Now, unfortunate news is coming out that it's not really just the United States that's doing this sort of thing. In fact, globally, there is still a huge expansion of oil pipeline production. When we actually look at the numbers, we find that more than 24,000 kilometers of new oil pipelines are under development around the world, a distance equivalent to almost twice the Earth's diameter, which in that context is just a really, really absurd number when you actually think about how large the Earth is and how much piping we're actually putting around the planet. Now, a report has revealed the projects are led by the United States, Russia, China, and India, and they are dramatically at odds with plans to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius, the researchers had said. Now, naturally, we see this combination of states and capital being at odds with the scientific necessity of trying to create and preserve the planet. This happens all the time. It is unfortunately nothing new. Now, the oil pumped through the pipelines would produce at least 5 billion tons of CO2 a year if completed, equivalent to the emissions of the United States, the world's second largest polluter. Now, I need to put that in its context. Currently, the United States releases about 5 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere every year as the second largest polluter on the planet. Also, given the population in the United States, that makes it very high on the list of the amount of CO2 released per capita. And so, what we have here is a circumstance where these pipelines would literally double what the US is doing right now. That is absolutely ridiculous, and that is in no way, shape, or form an attempt to actually make any sort of movement towards removing fossil fuels from use on the planet. And furthermore, these expansions are just going to make it impossible to reach the values that we're talking about. Now, further, it says here that about 40% of the pipelines are already under construction, with the rest in planning. Global carbon emissions must drop by 50% by 2030 to keep on track with internationally agreed targets for limiting global heating. So let's be real here. If something significant does not change, i.e., we do not get rid of global capitalism and the way that states are functioning, and the way that we're constantly extracting more resources from the planet, we are not seeing this drop by 50%. With the US leading the way in disguising its oil production expansion under a bill for climate change, and with all of these other nation states following suit, it's hardly going to happen. And by the time we start getting close to 2030, we'll start seeing the numbers talking about how by 2050 we need to change things. Meanwhile, extreme weather events are going to keep happening and happening more often. We're already seeing waterways dry up pretty much across the globe. There are literally rivers that are mighty rivers across the globe that are now either heating up or they are so low in terms of the amount of water they have that people can walk across sections of them, and people will be affected by these situations as the collateral and the cost of doing business in all of this. And speaking of the cost of doing business, we have here that the developers of the 10,000 kilometers of pipeline in construction currently stand to lose about $75 billion or 70 billion pounds if action on the climate crisis prevents the new pipelines from being fully used, according to General Energy Monitor. Now, the truth is that with the types of record breaking profits that these companies make all the time, because they are constantly making more and more profits every year, or they're not seen as properly expanding by their shareholders, this amount is relatively nothing. They're literally killing the planet to make the line go up and to continue to collect and hoard wealth for these shareholders, to the point where the external cost of destroying the planet isn't even taken into consideration. There is no full way to represent the cost of destroying the planet as an externality under capitalism. And yet we're sitting here talking about like we're worried about this $75 billion when it's a drop in the bucket for some of these companies who have produced trillions of dollars annually as a full industry. This is ridiculous that this even needs to be talked about as part of this story. Now, when we move a little further down, more than 24,000 kilometers of new oil pipelines are under development around the world, and we have a chart talking about and representing which countries are the ones in particular that are seeing an expansion of pipelines. And this is in kilometers of pipeline. And what we have here is that the four largest producers of emissions are expanding their pipeline production the most. And while all of this is being done, it's making a large amount of profit for corporations off the land that the people and these pipes will go through. The pipelines will go through towns, they will go through rivers, they will go through cities, and people will be the ones to suffer for this. And I might have a slightly different perspective if we were talking about some developing nation who is trying to expand some pipelines to ensure that its people actually have resources in the first place and who are developing infrastructure over time. But overwhelmingly, this list constantly has rich and wealthy nations that are allowing corporations to expand pipelines. And the nations on here that are not wealthy we'll address in a moment, but they themselves are not producing these pipelines. It is often foreignly controlled industries that are doing so. Now, this constant expansion of oil and gas production throughout the globe, with the US at the lead here, is a disturbing trend, and it continues to signify how capitalism and its goal of constant expansion are antithetical to the needs of the planet. Yet here we are sitting watching as they expand production on a resource that's literally killing the planet. And it's infuriating to watch. And it's really difficult to just stand by and see this happening in real time while we have the numbers and statistics, and yet nothing is effectively changing. And truth be told, it can't change under this current system because there's no incentive to do so. Now, the article goes on Russia, which is facing oil and gas boycotts from the West over the war in the Ukraine, wants to increase exports to India and China, is developing 2,000 kilometers of new pipelines. Now, the fact remains that regardless of what you feel about Russia right now, the fact remains that in all of this, that when it comes to the war machine being kicked off across the globe, the reality is once that war machine starts turning and trade ceases between countries, these nation states will start to look for new markets. And while we are seeing that Russia may want to expand to India and China, we'll likely see Europe end up doing something similar as new pipelines are developed to avoid Russian dependence on oil in the near future. This will be exploited by companies, and that will likely lead to an expansion of fossil fuel pipelines in the EU as well in the coming years. And, all of this, when it comes to nation states and everything that they do, it's always, this type of thing where they dress everything up as if it's eco-friendly. And the worst part is that they market it under these types of propaganda like what we see in the US. And I'll show you an example in just a moment. Where they constantly make it seem like this is actually really good for people, either right now or that it has eco-friendly potential in the near future. So we have here Energy Transfer, a company in the US, has the pipelines connect us, the benefits of pipeline and affordable energy. And if we zoom in here for a moment, we get things like affordable energy. America's producing more natural gas and crude oil than ever before. The ability of our pipeline network to quickly and affordably deliver it to market keeps our energy costs down. So everything here is about how the price is going to go down for the consumer. But it doesn't. The companies make more money, and so all of this nonsense and propaganda ends up not coming to fruition. Meanwhile, we have energy insecurity and economic support. The pipelines help us avoid costly imports and commodity price swings. There's the nationalism that we need to see. And so it'll lessen dependence on overseas sources. It'll create family sustaining jobs, US jobs. Pipelines and their associated infrastructure provide annual tax revenues to the communities through which they pass, supporting schools, libraries, parks, and other local initiatives. No, they don't. What they do is they poison water supplies in community. Eventually, these pipelines will all leak. You'll see rivers and towns completely destroyed. And the towns that do benefit from this are often at the end of the pipeline, where they won't actually see any of the repercussions of the pipeline itself. Then you've got things about convenience, about how the pipeline will actually benefit people because people will be able to get more heat to their homes and they'll be able to fly planes and all of this stuff. In the meantime, they dress themselves up completely as if this is a green energy initiative, where pipelines replace more carbon intensive transports like truck and rail, making it the greenest way to move energy supplies like natural gas, propane, and gasoline. Reduce congestion on roads and rail and shipping transport networks. And pipelines are much safer than the alternatives. No, they're not. The fact is, that, like I've talked about with the railroad industry before, if you actually have proper support on the rail lines and you actually have two people on the trains, transporting the oil would be fine there. Not that I'm supporting the oil being transported in that way either. I'd prefer to see oil production start to cease in favor of other means. We need to start seeing a transference of these energy productions, and we need to start seeing that now. And unfortunately, they are trying to dress this up again as if pipelines deliver the feedstocks to the manufacturing plants that build the wind turbines and solar panels. So they pretend like, pipelines supply the diesel fuel to transport solar panels and wind turbines. During natural disasters, power plants supported by gas pipelines are the only and fast reliable option to avoid brownouts and blackouts. They are lying through their teeth here in these propaganda tools to continue to expand these productions and to make it seem like and to sell you the idea that they are in fact part of the transition to green energy, when they are consistently expanding their own market with no sign of ever turning against it. If they were actually trying to see this shift and turn, we'd see green energies that are being produced start to rise substantially, and we'd start to see these start to level off instead of expanding even further. Now, there is another thing I wanted to address within this article before we wrap up. Now, right here we have a thing here. Regionally, sub-Saharan Africa is leading the world in pipeline development, with 2,000 kilometers of oil pipelines already under construction and an additional 4,500 kilometers proposed. The projects include the controversial East African crude oil pipeline, which will transport oil drilled from the national park in Uganda to an export terminal on the coast of Tanzania. Now, when it comes to this and this particular pipeline, the worst part about this is that this is a French company that's going into this territory to extract resources and profits. Whenever we see this type of thing happen in developing nations, it's usually a Western nation coming in to do this. In this particular case, it's Total Energy, which is the second largest company by revenue in France, that is extracting resources here. And I don't know if The Guardian intended this, but the way that this is framed here makes it seem as if the people of these countries made this decision. But that couldn't be further from the reality that we're seeing in places like Uganda and Tanzania. This is just another example of neo-colonial and neo-imperial programs, where we're seeing this shift where, it's being placed like, oh, the sub-Saharan African area is building pipelines and developing. No, it is Western imperial nations that are developing in order to extract resources. And that needs to be parsed out because the reality is very different from the propaganda that's coming out. Now, while the United States, as the imperial core, is expanding its oil pipeline production, the entire world is following suit and is expanding pipelines to generate more oil and kill the planet that much quicker. And it's doing so in a way that is using propaganda and tools to talk about how they're trying to transition into green energy, while again expanding beyond their own original places to create further wealth for their shareholders. And in the meantime, everything, here is just being dressed up in some eco-friendly solution through all of this. That makes it seem as if they are transitioning away from these products when they're in fact just expanding them even further. The point is that something needs to change. We can't keep seeing this massive expansion of industries that are literally killing the planet and making it inhabitable for nearly all species, including humans. So, with that said, if you've learned something here today, consider liking the video, subscribing, and leaving a comment, as well as joining my Discord where we have political conversations like these. If you're in a financial place to do so, and only if you're in a financial place to do so, please do consider supporting me on Patreon, especially as political content like this can often be demonetized on YouTube, and it goes a long way to helping the channel continue to produce content like this. The links for everything that I mentioned are in the description down below. And with that said, my name is Anarchist Terra. Thank you so much for watching.